The Problem with Libertarian Socialism by Zach Foster, read by the author. This recording is the property of the Political Spectrum and Political Spectrum Publishing. The philosophy known as Libertarian Socialism, also known as social anarchism and leftist libertarianism, is a system that advocates a non-bureaucratic, non-hierarchical, stateless society free of private property in the means of production. As utopian and intellectually impressive as this may sound to the willfully uneducated masses, the very definition of libertarian socialism is self-contradictory and already argues against the possibility of such a faulty system ever existing in the real world. How can there ever be a version of socialism implemented that is free of bureaucracy and hierarchy? Furthermore, how can self-proclaimed libertarian socialists not call themselves full-fledged communists? Socialism advocates the complete bureaucratic regulation of the means of production, of industry, and of property, while communism takes it even further by eliminating private property and implementing a dictatorship of the proletariat. Because socialism is a system based on complete bureaucratic regulation of property and the means of production, libertarian socialists cannot escape bureaucracy. They might be able to justify the elimination of hierarchy by citing the fact that all decisions are made by small but better representative bodies such as municipal councils, trade unions, or workers' councils, actually part of the subsystem known as council communism, and that all workers are equal, but the fact remains that the workers' councils, or any other forms of, quote, direct democracy, unquote, are the form of government for the workers, the members of society, either locally or on a larger scale. It's hard to imagine a larger scale of government when the utopian society of libertarian socialism is stateless. And since these councils are the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, then the councils are also the bureaucracy, which is inescapable by the utopian libertarian socialist. Furthermore, though the council members are fully representative of and completely equal with the workers and can be recalled at any time, they can only be recalled in the purely democratic form of a popular vote, which in fact might not represent all of the workers, voters, since some may be on the losing side of the vote and thus feel unrepresented by the workers' council. On top of that, while the members of the workers' council, the government body, are equal with the workers and recallable by them, until this hypothetical recall happens, the decisions of the council are the definitive, decisive outcomes which will affect the lives of all the workers, all the members of this utopian society, thus making the common workers, those not on the council, powerless to a certain degree. The council also becomes the very authoritarian institution that controls the means of production and the livelihood of the workers. The workers in the council have power, while those not in the council do not. This tragedy resurrects the bourgeois model of the haves and the have-nots. Here is where both hierarchy and authoritarianism exist, and such an existence is now an unavoidable truth, even to the utopian thinker. It may be possible to avoid the formation of states under this system, since for thousands of years the Native American tribes in North America and the Bedouin caravans of the Middle East lived without the formation of states, or at least the concept of states known to the Western world. Nonetheless, these tribes referred to themselves as nations or as peoples, and while they may or may not have practiced democracy and drawn borders for themselves, they still had a national identity. Cherokees were Cherokee, Creeks were Creek, Gabrielinos were Gabrielino, and Pashtuns were Pashtun. They still had a cultural identity, and every tribe had a system of government and laws. The libertarian socialist concept of free association is undermined by the fact of nature that humans naturally feel a need to belong to something, whether it is a state, a people, an organization, or a social class. In the awareness of one's sense of belonging to a social class, Lenin coined the term social patriotism. It is laughable for several reasons that the utopian libertarian socialist would consider making a lifestyle of free association. First and foremost, socialism makes no room for individualism. After all, the workers of the world are united in a common struggle to overthrow the bourgeoisie, abolish private property, and implement the dictatorship of the proletariat. As beautiful an idea as this may sound to the Industrial Revolution era wage worker, the fact of the matter is that the dictatorship of the proletariat is still a dictatorship, and dictatorships infringe on human rights. Expert economist Frank Chodorov of the Mises Institute writes, "The socialist seeks power for a humanitarian purpose. He would elevate all mankind to his ideal. Since the individual does not wish to be elevated and lays claim to something called rights, the socialist undertakes to prove that the individual does not exist, and that an amorphous thing called society is the only fact of reality, and proceeds to impose his set of values on this thing. In this respect, the socialist is no different from the millions of bureaucrats who now infest the social order. The bureaucrat is, like the socialist, a ruler by natural selection." Some utopian thinkers might claim that the individual could simply leave the group and find another which better suits his needs. This, however, is not only selfish in comparison to the needs of society, but already unrealistic since the individual has no rights under this dictatorship and cannot realistically expect to leave the utopia, which ever looks more and more like a dystopia. In the book Wage, Labor, and Capital, Karl Marx argues that the worker, while able to divorce himself from a particular employer or capitalist, cannot divorce himself from the capitalist class and expect to survive, because current society is a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Using this form of logic, it is reasonable to argue that under a dictatorship of the proletariat, the individual, whose existence and rights are nullified for the greater good, cannot divorce himself from the working class or society. After all, the individual will have no access whatsoever to the means of production, which are completely controlled by the bureaucratic workers' councils, and if he expects to work or eat, he must give up the idea of divorcing himself from any group in society. His selfish desires for freedom will go unsatisfied because he cannot escape society without becoming a reactionary pariah, without becoming the Unabomber of the workers' society, the Kerensky of Lenin's Soviet Union, or even worse, being labeled a counter-revolutionary in a revolutionary society. Chodorov writes, "A people can vote themselves into slavery, though they cannot vote themselves out of it." For one to call himself a libertarian socialist, a fantasy inconsistent with both reality and socialism, certainly inconsistent with Marxism, is unrealistic and foolishly utopian, in danger of becoming dystopian if any attempt at implementation is made. This fantasy is akin to Marxists being socio-political masochists by lying to themselves that there is no difference between socialism and communism, that capitalism sets humanity back rather than helping humanity to evolve, that socialism and communism are humanitarian, that up is down and red is blue, and the tooth fairy really does give you money for your teeth. Countless attempts have been made to implement socialism within modern society. The system might work on the small communal level, but even still, most if not all socialists subscribe to Marx's theory, reiterated in Chris Harman's book, How Marxism Works, that, quote, "You cannot build an island of socialism in a sea of capitalism. Attempts by small groups of socialists to cut themselves off and lead their lives according to socialist ideas always fail miserably in the long term," unquote. However, Harman, with the gift of historical hindsight that Marx didn't have, still fails to see that countless attempts have also been made to implement socialism on a grand scale and have also failed, most times with millions of people killed in the process. The author will fully admit, Lenin, Trotsky, and other revolutionaries were brilliant men, with extensive educations and extensive knowledge of Marxism, socialism, and communism. If these brilliant people could not make it work, what makes other people so arrogant that they think they can do what these brilliant men failed to do? Both socialism and communism, when implemented, have had to be adulterated and still failed because these systems don't work, and no amounts of bullets or pseudo-intellectual academic writings can change this reality. Libertarian socialism is a lie. Libertarianism is a system which places importance on the rights of the individual, completely inconsistent with socialism, which is collectivist and inflexible. Socialism, beneficent in theory but oppressive in practice, is a system which cannot and does not work. End of this essay. The Political Spectrum and Political Spectrum Publishing hopes that you have enjoyed this essay. For more essays on politics, current events, political philosophy, and political economy, feel free to visit www.political-spectrum.com. For extensive readings disproving Marxism and socialism, visit the Anti-Marxists Internet Archive at www.antimarxists.com.